Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So if you can't already tell, this video is going to be a bit different from my usual content for a few different reasons. First of all, hi, this might be the first time that a lot of you are seeing my face. I typically don't use my camera in my videos because I don't think it's necessary, and I also don't have the highest quality camera. But this video is a bit more of a serious topic, and it has a lot to do with who I am as a person. As an Asian person, I am Filipino and Korean. So I wanted to present the most authentic version of myself here. Today we're going to be talking about the casual racism that a lot of K-pop stans exhibit towards Asian people. And keep in mind that throughout this video I'll be using the blanket term Asian, but I am specifically referencing East and Southeast Asian people here. Of course, that doesn't make South Asian people any less Asian. It's just a lot easier to use the word Asian without adding East and Southeast in front of it every single time. This is also a video essay of sorts, so I will be citing some sources, and when that happens, I'll be displaying the article titles in the top left. And this video is also scripted, so I will be looking over to the side here to look at my script from time to time, so hopefully that doesn't bother you guys too much. You can also find all of the sources that I'll be citing in the description box down below, so if you want to check out any of those links, feel free to do that. But with all of that out of the way, that kind of concludes our intro, so now we can start with the real commentary that you've all been waiting for. I want to start off by saying that in general, Asian people experience a unique type of racism that can't be compared to what other minorities face. Asians objectively receive less discrimination in things like employment, housing, and criminal justice compared to other racial minorities. That's just a fact. However, Asian people still do struggle with harmful stereotypes and expectations. Over the years, the term model minority has been something attached to the identity of Asians in many American or European countries, and the meaning behind this phrase refers to how Asians have historically been the minority that best fit in with Caucasian-dominated societies. Because of stereotypes depicting us as hardworking, traditional, and most of all obedient, Asians are viewed as the most compatible with societies that oppress them. And this is because we are seen as least likely to question or rise up against these systems. If you don't understand what I just said, to put it simply, since Asians are seen as non-threatening compared to other minorities, white people can integrate them more easily and willingly into their societies because they can control them easier. These stereotypes have historically been reinforced through events such as the construction of the American Transcontinental Railroad, where the Chinese workers who built a large percentage of the track did so for half pay and lived in tents, while their white coworkers lived in train cars, had meals provided to them, received double the Chinese workers' wages. These stereotypes come into play here, where despite this blatant mistreatment, there are few Chinese strikes or protests seen in history at the railroads. And the ones that did occur saw no success after their employers would simply cut off their food resources until the Chinese workers resumed their jobs. So, as I've just explained, over history, it has been reinforced that Asian people are very easy to manipulate and control, and even if they aren't, then you can just punish them until they act correctly. But how does this come into play today? The example that I just gave you is from the 19th century, so what does that have to do with K-pop, a 21st century form of media, and how its international consumers treat Asian people? I'd like to share the idea that the way people viewed Asian people in the 19th century and the way they do today are actually not that different. And this can especially be seen with how K-pop stans talk about K-pop idols. Now, we all know the industry is very tough on idols. They are expected to always act cordially, and there's a somewhat rigid outline on what a K-pop idol can and cannot do. K-pop idols are expected to listen to their fans, and they often have to apologize whenever their actions upset them. They hold up all of these tough values for essentially no other reason than because it is the status quo, and they do all of this while working restless nights filled with busy schedules and practices. In other words, K-pop idols are hardworking, hold up traditional values, and are obedient to their fans. Sound familiar? If you don't remember, these are the exact same traits that make Asian people the quote-unquote model minority. And I believe that's a huge reason why K-pop is so appealing to those in English-speaking countries. Since the way the K-pop industry molds idols aligns with Western expectations as to how Asian people should act, I think that's a big reason why so many international stans like to support K-pop. Now, I don't want to accuse everyone watching of perpetuating racist stereotypes of Asians, because that is obviously not the case. I know plenty of fellow K-pop stans who are really just here to consume the content given to them, and are respectful of the boundaries between them as a fan and their favorite idols. However, I know for a fact that a large amount of hardcore K-pop stans overstep these boundaries and like to dictate how idols should act. Once again, Western ideals want Asian people to be respectful and obedient, and in Western countries it is pretty easy to identify what disrespectful behavior looks like. But the Western image of respect is not the same as the one in Korea. South Korea is on the opposite side of the world from where most of you watching right now are from, and the people living there have a completely different social etiquette, so showing respect looks different to Koreans than it does to most of us. But for some reason, many Western K-pop stans think that it is their right or something to say what is and isn't correct behavior when it comes to K-pop idols. Over the years, we've seen how idols like the members of Momoland, Soyeon of (G)I-DLE, and most recently Wonyoung of IVE have received insurmountable amounts of hate from the international audiences because of their attitudes. Momoland, as I've said on this channel before, have essentially gotten their entire careers taken out of their hands due to things such as not bowing to their seniors when walking down an aisle to receive an award, which, side note, probably shouldn't be something commented on by non-Koreans, or other things like not smiling when another artist was receiving an award and giving their speech. Soyeon has been a part of many selfish controversies, with people calling her greedy for having the most lines in (G)I-DLE's title tracks, and Wonyoung has been labeled a diva and a pick-me by international K-pop stans for basically just interacting with male idols and other things such as wearing uncomfortable contacts that made her roll her eyes. Based on what I just said, even to the average European or American citizen, none of these idols' actions realistically seem disrespectful to the point where it justifies canceling them. And I honestly think that if these idols were 1, not idols, and 2, not Asian, then they likely would not have received nearly as much backlash as they did. But since K-pop and its culture allows fans to claim some sort of ownership over their favorite idols, and society has historically rewarded people for punishing Asians when they act incorrectly, I think many people think that it's okay to dictate idols' actions. The punishment in this case, of course, comes in the form of online backlash, and I can't help but think that if these K-pop idols were, say, white men, then the international fans wouldn't see their alleged bad attitudes as a big deal. Western society allows white people to be way more disrespectful than minorities, and behavior like this only becomes a problem when a person of color does it. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, I think people get a sort of self-gratification from asserting dominance over Asian people because the conditions that they grew up in taught them that that's what they're supposed to do. And K-pop stans kind of chase this gratification when K-pop idols don't adhere to Western behavior expectations. Another thing we need to consider in situations like this is the gender of the idol in question. It's no secret that around the world women face more scrutiny than men for their behaviors, and in this case, Momoland, (G)I-DLE, and IVE are all girl groups. Combine this with the fact that these girl groups are all Asian, and it's not hard to come to the conclusion that if these idols were white men, their attitudes would likely have never become a topic of discussion in the first place. White men rolling their eyes, not greeting their co-celebrities, or even putting others down in order to further their own careers has basically been normalized in Western media. Think of singers such as Justin Bieber or Brendan Urie, who have been caught in a sizable amount of controversies regarding how they've treated their fans, co-workers, and other important people in their lives. And yet, somehow, Western media has essentially moved past all of these controversies, and both of them are still superstars in the industry. However, when it comes to female celebrities, both Asian and non-Asian, it seems like people are much more ready and willing to remind everyone of their past mistakes whenever they make notable achievements. Think Mariah Carey and her diva behavior, or Miley Cyrus and her alleged bad attitude. Now, of course, anyone is allowed to dislike anyone for whatever reasons. It's not a crime to have a negative opinion of a person. However, you can still not like someone and acknowledge the disadvantages they face because of their gender. Would people be as willing to create a hate train and say disgusting things about Soyeon if she weren't an Asian woman? Why are men allowed to make the same mistakes over and over again, losing little to no fan support, but if a female celebrity makes a mistake, it follows her for the rest of her career? Objectively speaking, when Western audiences see men acting rude or selfishly, that's just how the industry works. And again, it only becomes a problem when someone from a less privileged group is the topic of discussion. These are things that we as media consumers need to acknowledge right alongside the unfair expectations that different minority groups face in the industry. Another common tactic I see used to antagonize Asian people online is generalization. Generalization is when people take events or words spoken by individuals and use them to make statements about entire groups of people. For example, and I'll just use two groups that I'm a part of, if I saw one Korean person berate a Filipino person and said, "Korean people hate Filipinos," that would be a generalization of Korean people. And K-pop fans make harmful generalizations like this literally every single day. See, generalizations on their own don't seem like the biggest deal in the world. When people interact with others in real life, they kind of represent the groups they belong to, and people can use this to kind of figure out how to interact with people who are different from them, what they are or aren't allowed to say or do. However, generalizations become harmful when they come from unreliable sources or cherry-picked moments that aren't accurate to the entire group, because then people will make assumptions based on, essentially, misinformation. One of the biggest examples of what I view as an unreliable source on the Korean general public's opinion is the website Panchoa. Panchoa is a translator website that translates articles and threads from the Korean social media platform Pan to English, so that English-speaking fans can gain an insight on what Korean people think about current events in K-pop and K-drama. So on paper, this doesn't seem that bad, right? If international stans consume Korean media, then of course it would be interesting to them to see what people from Korea think of their interests, because Korean citizens are the ones who K-pop are mostly marketed towards. And this appeal is what has led Panchoa's Twitter account to acquiring almost 130,000 followers on Twitter, with their posts and articles gaining tens of thousands of clicks daily from people who want to get inside the minds of the Korean general public. But what most people who follow this account don't realize is that these translated articles don't represent the Korean citizens accurately at all, and that's because of Panchoa's sources. While it's true that Panchoa accurately translates articles from the network Pan, Pan itself is somewhat of a niche platform, catered to a more immature portion of Korea's population. In an article describing Pan's user base, it said that most people who use Pan are K-pop fans, who want to be able to share their opinions without consequence. Pan users are not required to register with a real name or verify their social networks, so due to the anonymous nature of the site, it attracts a lot of trolls who just want to stir controversy with their posts. The Panchoa articles that gain the most traction online are the ones with very obvious negative connotations to them. Posts about Korean users calling idols ugly or saying other awful things about them will receive hundreds of thousands of clicks, and the more tame ones don't really get any engagement at all. This then leads to people making really sweeping generalizations of the nature of Korean people as a whole, which is pretty harmful to the large number of Koreans who don't think this way. This same article points out how the actual most popular and most accurate digital news portal to represent the Korean general public is actually Naver. Naver handles nearly 75% of all web searches in South Korea, with 42 million enrolled users. And to put that into perspective, South Korea only has a population of around 51 million people. In order to post on Naver, one has to verify their real name and give permission to have their IP address tracked, meaning you can't say whatever you want because it can be traced back to you. And people who spread false rumors on Naver often find themselves facing legal action. So, Naver faces way fewer trolls on the platform and is a better representation of Korean people's opinions. And looking at posts and comments made on Naver versus Pan, Naver is much more tame. Contrasting what people say in reaction to Panchoa articles, Korean people on Naver seem to be much more sympathetic to idols' health, and don't really care much to criticize their visuals. And to be honest, most K-pop scandals that get a lot of traction on Panchoa are not even being talked about at all on Naver. So what's the point? What am I trying to say here? Well, essentially the message that I'm trying to get across is that the awful thing you saw a Korean person say online is likely just the thoughts of a random troll, and you shouldn't use situations like that to generalize the entire population of South Korea. Sure, it is likely a Korean person saying that awful thing, but the users on Pan are the worst of the worst, and in American terms, Pan is what we could call the 4chan or the Stan Twitter of South Korea. Now, we wouldn't want others to think that people on Stan Twitter represent the entire opinions of the US or the UK. So why has it become normalized to do this with Panchoa and South Korea? That's mostly a rhetorical question, but if I had to answer it, I would say it's mostly because of a lack of information. People who say these things really just don't know any better, and that's a big reason why I wanted to make this video. However, another big reason I wanted to make this video is due to some personal experiences that I've had. Now, I wouldn't call myself a big name in the K-pop community if I'm being honest. I'm a small content creator at best who gives his opinions on random things, and I've only recently done my face reveal online. I've been using my camera on livestream ever since I hit 20k, and only a couple of months have passed since then. But even in the 2 months since people have found out that I'm an Asian man, I've seen the way that people interact with me and talk about me online change. Before I did my face reveal, most of my viewers thought that I was white because of my commentary, I guess. I don't know if it was the way I spoke, but I guess that has to be it because that's the only thing people had to go off of. But generally, the consensus was that I was white before I did my face reveal. And I think back then, people treated me with a lot more respect because the one time I did reveal in a video that I'm Asian and spoke on an Asian issue, that's when people started to have a problem with me. In a video that I've now privated, I one time mentioned how I have a problem with non-Asian stans using words from Asian languages in a joking way. I said how non-Asian people using Korean words in their posts to make them seem sillier or less serious came across as mocking to me, and should be something that's taken a bit more seriously. I, at the time, didn't think that was a very controversial thing to say, but I guess I thought wrong because immediately what the reaction was people saying that I was out of line with my words. They said that I was gatekeeping languages by saying that people just shouldn't mock Korean. And I received a lot of threats saying longtime viewers would stop watching my content if I didn't apologize. And the thing is, a majority of these comments came from people who offered up the fact that they are not Asian. They would say things like, "I'm white and I use Korean words with my friend group all the time as a joke. It's not that serious, you're just overreacting." And it was surprising to see so many people, white people in particular, act like they had this sort of authority over me on an issue that doesn't affect them. Why did so many non-Asian people have a problem with me sharing something that made me uncomfortable as an Asian? And even if they disagreed, why did they address me with such a lack of respect when I always did my best and do my best to be as respectful as possible in my commentary? Again, I think this has to do with the idea of the model minority. Asian people as a model minority are supposed to be obedient and keep their thoughts to themselves whenever they have a problem surrounding how others treat them because of their race. So when I essentially called people out for their problematic behavior, I, in that instance, was going against my role as a model minority. And I think a lot of these commenters were threatened by that, so they wanted to intimidate me or punish me in order to get me back into that model minority mold. And in the end, I guess they won when I took the video down, which I do still sort of regret doing to this day. I just didn't understand why so many people couldn't sit back and listen when I talked about something that affected me and not them, but now I think I have an idea. I think many K-pop stans and a lot of other people in the world just don't like it when Asian people stand up for themselves. Like with many of the idols we've talked about today, the second an Asian person does something that doesn't fit with how society thinks Asians should act, many people's first instinct is to shut that behavior down. And lots of K-pop stans only like Asian people when they're in that docile, hardworking, respectful, obedient mold. which is why I think so many K-pop fans don't like Asians as much as they think they do. Because liking K-pop doesn't mean you support Asian people if you won't let Asians break out of that model minority stereotype. And that concludes this video. Thank you all so much for watching if you stuck throughout the entire thing, and I hope you enjoyed. If you resonate with anything that I said in this video, remember to keep spreading kindness even in the face of adversity, because we should all do our part to lift each other up. Please don't antagonize white people or white K-pop stans after watching this video, because that's not my intention at all. That's not what I want you to do. Instead, focus on yourself first and see if there's anything you can do to treat Asian people better, even if you yourself aren't Asian, because I know so many Asians that reinforce these harmful stereotypes. And once you've focused on you, then open up conversations with other people. Don't attack them online, do your best to actually have a civil conversation about things like this. And if that doesn't work, just move on. Thank you all again for your support. I appreciate you all so much, and before we go, I want to thank all of my channel members. These people allow me to focus on making high-effort content like this for you all, and their financial support makes my life so much easier. If you want to become a channel member, click either the first link in the description or join button down below. And without further ado, I want to thank Sonorinth, Opijin ITZY, Jujumin, Twicetees, Dog, Saiyan Lover, What's OP, Zeus112, Flo099, Jackie, Abe, ZVH, Wu Youngie, Yin Latte, Jed, Soda Scribbles, Minacore, Adrian Wang, Shiny, Male T, Mizu Monorovie, Sunny, Cassie, Frago Bobo, Kelsey, Gav, Adifa N, Irene, Chili's Cafe, Mello, Ale, Sydney, Elena Kantaki, Julia Peterson, Che, 97th Heaven, Frosty Plays, Julian Zalazar, Jay, Goyangzi, Alpha Fox, Edgy Does Things, Miriam, Silverwind, Namjoon's Lost AirPods, Julia, Ray, and Kyukun Love. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel, and I guess I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you all again for listening to what I had to say. This video is like really important to me, and peace out, guys.